Yeah, we're basically going live right now, so it'll take a second to get it loaded up and everything on that front. So while we get going, why don't you just tell me about yourself. Give me some quick background of yourself. How'd you get into crypto? How'd you get into space? I'm with Clay Space, right?
Yeah.
Is that Yeah, so you're the founder of Blockspace Media, and you've got this multi-platform story world called Back to Earth. So Clay, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell me more?
Yeah. Well, I've been in the space since 2014, so I've kind of been around since pre-Ethereum, and then as Ethereum launched, and
Platform.
watching the evolution as this world has kind of expanded. And for me, kind of the big thing that drew me into Bitcoin was this fact of online ownership, the fact that you could basically have this token and be the owner of that. And before Bitcoin came along, that was essentially impossible. And so for me, kind of as I began to get more more engaged with the space and become a larger a trader of the cryptocurrencies, and then of course I ended up creating my own projects. The thing for me was kind of noticing how Bitcoin can act essentially as in a way of like a marketing tool, or a way of expanding networks in ways that haven't really been possible online before.
Oh, okay. So let's start with, kind of how you got started. So you were an early, I get, or, so you got into the space, you said around 2014?
Yeah, yeah.
And how'd you hear about this Bitcoin stuff? Did you like
Uh,
friend? Did
there,
you buy a pizza?
I wasn't a pizza guy, but no, I found an article on Bloomberg, and it was right after the Bitcoin top of like $1,200 in early 2014, late
Okay,
2013.
so that was like right after Mount Gox blew up, I think, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, basically. And so the article, was talking all about Bitcoin. I remember kind of looking into it and thinking, wow, it seems really expensive at 600, $700. But I bought some actually so that I could participate in the Ethereum ICO that was taking place around that time as well. So
well,
my
and let's just go back. I think it's always fun to kind of go back to the old days. Back in 2014, I couldn't just download my Coinbase app and transfer some money. So you want to talk about how life was, back in ancient times?
yeah, oh, that's a good question. I want to say that I bought it on Coinbase.
Oh, was
Um,
Coinbase up? Okay,
I think
because
so. Yeah. If it wasn't Coinbase, it would have been, man. It would have been. There were some really tiny apps at the time, like Holy Transaction, and some like coffee shops that were trying to get into the space and sell Bitcoin. So I want to say I bought it off Coinbase. I remember having to be 18 to purchase it. So that would have had to have been like a Coinbase thing.
okay, no, which is great. I know like some of the times, I first got into it way back, but then I got out of it for a bit. But like when you first started, you had to like download like a special piece of software and like go on like some secret internet place and
No,
move
I
the.
always think like, man, I wish I knew about Bitcoin in 2012. But to the same degree, I don't think that I would have had the technical prowess to like actually like be able to conserve my Bitcoin and not have it stolen, or lost in some way.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
to a
That was
degree,
rough.
it's almost safer. By 2014, there were a lot fewer exchange hacks. Of course, Mt. Gox had already happened. There was better security. Um, and then like outside of like MintPal, there hasn't really been a large exchange collapse since 2014, I'd say.
Yeah. Okay. So you got in, you bought some Bitcoin and specifically, what you had heard about Ethereum and that's what you wanted to get in on,
Yeah,
or
no, that was funny because Ethereum at the time was basically like Vitalik was going on these really, really tiny YouTube shows and like talking for an hour about his project, and and then even when they did their fundraise, I want to say they rose, what did they raise? I mean, it was a significant amount of money at the time, but even now it's kind
I
of,
mean, it was a lot, but it's like compared to the ICOs these days, it was like a rounding error, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So okay, so you got in, and what about Ethereum? Like, was Ethereum the thing that got you excited about the space, or?
Yeah, I think you see this like with every alt cycle. Like if you look at the market in general as a whole, as Bitcoin kind of moves up, I think a lot of the new people who come into the space, they see Bitcoin as being too expensive, and they say, well, what can I buy that's not Bitcoin? Or like they feel like they've already missed that train, so they want to
Mm,
get on the next Bitcoin train. And
mm,
so for me, when I found Ethereum, it was, oh, this could be that next Bitcoin train.
mm.
And so I think that was ultimately why I purchased the Ethereum ICO. It was, you know, it was the technology and kind of what Vitalik was talking about was really exciting. Even though it really has kind of evolved into something much different than, you know, that original pitch. But ultimately it was trying to find like what is the next coin that could do a Bitcoin.
Wow, and that's interesting because I mean, spend some time on this. What do you remember? What was the Ethereum pitch when it first came out? Because
It,
you're right, it's not. It is a little different.
it was like this, you know, he was basically saying like it was a, you know, a computer, you know, internet 2.0 sort of stuff. And kind of pitching it. I remember one of his biggest pitches was like you could be driving in your car and pass a toll road, and the toll road could essentially take money out of your account through the blockchain, and they would all kind of be connected in a way. And I remember thinking that sounds really cool. But of course, now we know like Ethereum essentially has become like the platform that you build on top of and build other currencies and tokens on top of, and it's kind of become like that ICO funding platform to a degree.
Mm-hmm. Wow, cool. So fast forward a couple years, I guess you were tangentially involved, and now you're mostly involved in this space, or you're all in on blockchain, or how do we go from hey, Ethereum's kind of cool to hey, I'm running a project, right?
Right. No, yeah. Well, because it definitely started for me. It started with trading it, right? And so in trading it, you really have to understand kind of the economics of the token, of the currencies that you're trying to trade, so that you're not potentially buying it way too high and then losing a lot of money. And through that, of course, I went through a lot of interesting experiences. Specifically, one of the things that rang the most interesting to me was when the DAO came out back in 2016. And not necessarily the hack that ended up destroying the DAO, but kind of like what essentially like the idea of the DAO was it was the system that allowed you to basically bet on projects and invest in projects. And if you bet on the right projects and invested in the right ones, then the value of the entire ecosystem, the entire DAO ecosystem would increase and the value of your tokens would. And the major mechanism behind it was this kind of voting system where you'd use your tokens to vote. And the thing that kind of happened when they came out with their first round of contracts that people could vote on is that only 5% of the entire ecosystem voted on contracts. And this was a $150 million project. And they had 5% user participation, which is terrible.
Yeah,
And
that's awful, especially for all that money they raised.
exactly, exactly. And there was basically everybody in the space. I mean, I put in a shit ton of money. Everyone in the space was involved in this token.
Huh.
And nobody voted on the contracts. And so for me, I started thinking, well, are these tokens really incentivized to get users to participate in their ecosystems? And so that kind of became like, how do you create a token that really does get users to interact with the ecosystem that you built? And I think in general, a lot of tokens today are kind of messing that up. Or one of the biggest arguments against blockchain or against cryptocurrencies in general is that you have basically this extra layer that the audience or the people within your ecosystem have to interact with in order to enjoy what your ecosystem provides. And it ends up becoming a pretty large barrier to entry for typical users.
Well, that's actually segueing into another fascinating discussion, which, let's follow in line with, what the heck is one of these tokens worth? Or how do you value this token? Or am I buying at a price that's too high or too low? And,
Mm-hmm.
being that you mentioned that you'd spent years studying this thing and, sounds like maybe you've had some success. Why don't you share? I mean, why don't you pick a token and tell me, like how do you even find out if, like, I don't know, Gollum or Neo or Stellar or Ripple, whatever,
Mhm.
how's this thing even worth anything? Do you see what I mean? Or,
Yeah.
and I'm throwing a lot of stuff out there, so I don't mean to confuse.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess like if you're looking at like valuating the currency, one thing that you have to understand going into it is that essentially, still today, the value of most currencies in the market are purely based on speculation, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. One, it means that everything is hyper overvalued. So you have these $1 billion networks that really and truly are probably worth $0. But because people are speculating on the future value, the value continues to increase. And actually the interesting thing around that is there was a study out that looked at the value of a cryptocurrency once they actually begin to launch their ecosystem and allow users to interact with that ecosystem. And they found that cryptocurrency projects with launched materials and with launched projects actually have lower values than cryptocurrencies that haven't launched anything. And it's all because of this power of like what's in your mind and that imagination. And if you can imagine that this project is going to be bigger and better, right? If you're looking at Ethereum and saying this is going to take over the world, feasibly, if it's going to take over the world, it should have $1 trillion market cap. And so to that degree, if enough people believe that, you can get it to a high enough valuation.
Which is funny and completely counterintuitive, right? So actually, that's right. If you deploy your project or deploy a test net or deploy mainnet, your valuation drops because people see reality
Yeah.
instead of some, poorly constructed dream, aka a white paper.
Yeah, I think to a degree it relates to like how everyone's always like the book was better than the movie, and it's
Yeah.
because like you read a book, like your imagination takes over for the story, the characters are in your head, the settings are in your head. Once you see the movie, all of that becomes materialized in front of you, and you're always kind of like, well, that's not exactly how I imagined it, and so I think you kind of have that thing where you're fighting someone's imagination.
So then, what is it? The moral of the story is just write a good white paper and raise a ton of money. And
Yeah, it never release. Well, I think ultimately the moral is one, you have to look at a blockchain project. You have to decide, does this actually work? What it's trying to do? Is there a reason that we should be using the blockchain and not some sort of centralized database? And then the second thing you have to look at, I think, at least as a token creator, is finding ways in which you can kind of essentially decouple the monetary value of the token with like the value that token brings to the user. And so, because ultimately, the average consumer is not looking at these things as an investment. They're trying to use this because they want to interact on your platform. And so, if they're thinking about this token value, then they're much less likely to use it. As we saw with the DAO, they're thinking about how do I conserve my value in the future? Oh, I can't spend it today voting. And actually, that kind of segues into one of the things that I've noticed, is with dating apps. You've got apps like Tinder and Bumble. There's an app called Coffee Meets Bagel, and they each have like these different ways of monetizing. So Tinder is a subscription fee essentially. You subscribe for $10 a month, and you kind of get like some unlimited access to the platform. You get some extra benefits to it. Bumble and Coffee Meets Bagel, on the other hand, actually have token systems essentially, where you can buy tokens and then you can use those tokens to purchase interactions on the site. And if you look at how those incentivize people to interact on the site, Tinder is the top selling app on the market, in the entire market. It's the top grossing app in the App Store. Bumble and Coffee Meets Bagel, on the other hand, are not. And I think ultimately the reason is that when you're looking at things and you're buying these tokens of value, every time you spend it, you're thinking, this is going to cost me $2.50 to talk to this girl. Whereas on Tinder, by the subscription, through the subscription fee, you're actually removing that level of, oh, this is going to cost me money.
Okay, so that's interesting. So let's, so what you're saying, so if I understand correctly, what you just said was Tinder grosses more, and because what you have to pay for Tinder? I mean, I haven't used Tinder, in quite some time. So I recall it was a free app, right? Or what do you
Mhm.
mean by that? Or do
So
you subscribe to Tinder or?
yeah, so they've since then they've kind of moved to a payment model. So you can still use it for free, but then there's certain extra things that you can use to like help you increase your matches, to match with people sooner, so that you're not kind of at the will of the deck of the cards as to who you're liking. So that you basically right, so you're increasing your chances of finding that perfect match.
Okay, so that's okay. So with Tinder, okay, so you pay a fee for that, and
Mhm.
then you're saying Bumble and Coffee Meets Bagel has a token system, or what you buy tokens in there to do the same things, or
Yeah, so both Bumble and Coffee Meets Bagel don't have subscriptions. Do is essentially if you want to essentially show your interest in a girl, you can buy a certain number of tokens. In Bumble, I think it's Bumble Coffee Meets Bagel, or they're like beans, and you can essentially like super like their profile, and basically that will notify them that you show interest. So you're essentially kind of paying to talk to them.
interesting.
With Tinder, it's the same thing. You're essentially paying for the subscription, but what they do is they give you a set number of extra super likes that you get per day, that you can kind of send out to people. So you're not paying per super like, you're paying for a monthly access to these things.
Okay, so now in those scenarios, when they're tokenizing or whatever, and let's be clear, so does Tinder make more money, or did you say Bumble makes more money?
Tinder
Because
Tinder makes more money. Yeah, Tinder's
okay,
the number one app on the number one grossing app on the App Store.
so doesn't that kind of go against the token play
It
then?
does.
Because
It does. Yeah, absolutely. Because basically, what it's saying is that, and kind of what I'm getting to on my point here is that when you're associating a value with these tokens, for instance, in Bumble or Coffee Meets Bagel, when you're purchasing these tokens and you're purchasing, say, 1,000 tokens for $20, you now know exactly how much value is in each of these tokens. So each time you spend them, you're thinking, I'm spending 250 to talk to this girl. Whereas
uh,
with Tinder, they have abstracted that sort of value. You're still paying $10 a month, but each time you super like someone, you aren't really thinking this is costing. And so
wow.
ultimately, I think that projects that are using tokens, they need to find a way, and this is the hardest part, they need to find a way where they can kind of abstract the value from the user so that the user is not thinking, this is costing me money every time that they're using these tokens within the system.
Okay, so now let's get that into a project then. So that example you gave is a situation where tokens actually hurt the cause compared to helping the cause, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
the takeaway from there is not every project should be tokenized.
right.
Um, you know, don't just add it because it's adding additional layers of complexity or things like that to that
Mm-hmm.
equation. So, let's maybe talk about, your project, because I would assume that your project uses some sort of a blockchain, and hopefully you've built your project the right way, right? Otherwise it wouldn't be your project. So
Yeah.
what are you doing? You've got some entertainment project or
Mm-hmm.
something on that front
Yeah.
play?
Well, we kind of have an interesting story as far as kind of how this sort of realization is. So we did an ICO back in 2017. We did it like right before it was big. So it was like mid-April, and we'd been planning it since 2016. And so there weren't really a whole lot of people who were helping with ICOs on the market at that time. Up until basically 2017, if you wanted to run an ICO, you needed to create the platform on your own and kind of do it all by yourself. And by 2017, there were some companies that were starting to help out with that sort of with these fundraising mechanisms. And of course, today there's a lot. So we began our fundraiser in April, and the company that we hired to kind of help us do this was one of the first to market. And so basically their job was to help us collect the Bitcoin that we raised and then distribute our token to the people who helped us fundraise. And what happened was at a certain point after we finished our ICO, we got needed to distribute our tokens. And suddenly we realized that this company had misdistributed over $100,000 worth of our token, which was like 10%.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay, so you guys, okay, so let's go back. So you guys had an ICO.
yeah,
Now, is this a blockchain that you guys built yourself? Did you fork something? Was this on Ethereum?
it's it's ERC20, so it runs on Ethereum.
Okay, so you have an ERC20 blockchain, and you'd hired a company to basically raise capital for you,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they lost some of your tokens or something bad
Yeah,
happened.
basically, yeah, they sent over 10% of these tokens to wrong addresses so that people who had purchased these tokens couldn't access them. They never received them. It was a total mess. And so we, of course, we approached this company. We said, we need your help to fix this. And ultimately, they refused us. And they walked away from our project. And so they kind of left us in the situation where we needed to fix it on our own. And so we spent 3 months analyzing our blockchain, looking at all the people who had lost their tokens, and finding a way that we could get this entire situation fixed. And of course, we thought that our audience was going to love us for this, because we were basically, fighting the scammers. We were fixing the issue, and we realized very quickly that that was not the case. The audience was extremely furious. They basically thought that we were the scammers. They thought that we were the ones who had kind of screwed up everything. And what we quickly realized is the reason that this is taking place is because we are dealing with other people's money, right? We're dealing with their money. And so for them, what they're seeing is they're seeing a mismanagement of a financial asset for them. And where that's an issue is because we're building entertainment. And ultimately we fix this problem, but we still are working to fix that reputation. It's been a year. But when you're working in entertainment, if you're going to a movie, you're not thinking, how am I going to watch this movie and make money off this movie? Which is very similar, right? Nobody thinks that when they watch a movie, but when you're having a token, a lot of people are coming in, they're saying, how can I buy this token and make money off this token? But you want to remove that sort of feeling in entertainment, because you want the person to go to that movie, sit back, relax, and enjoy it. And the second that you start to add this sort of financial layer, if you're not careful, you end up making these, your audience, you end up making them a producer. And when you make them a producer, they no longer are viewing the entertainment from the same perspective of, oh, this is enjoyable. They're now kind of watching this thing and saying, I don't think they're doing this right. What can they do better? And they start to, become very hypercritical. And you want to try to remove that hypercriticality in the experience.
So maybe we should step back, because I kind of followed you, but I might be a little slower. What does your project do? Because you got into about movies and monetization and entertainment, and I understand you do something for entertainment, but why don't we start there? Because that might make it a little better for me to follow you.
For sure. Yeah, so what Back to Earth is, essentially it's a multimedia story. So we're creating a graphic novel, we're creating a TV series, and we're also creating an interactive experience. And we have a token that interacts within this world that not only our characters use, but you also can use. And you can use it for rewards, for discounts on merchandise, to unlock specific content. And so the idea is to kind of draw you into the story through not just the story itself, but through the token interaction as well.
Okay, so I just, out of curiosity, just Googled you, and I see this story on Bitcoin.com. You're the most elusive crowdfund in crypto.
Yeah, that was back in 2017. We have we actually had an article on Sci-Fi recently that kind of, because we just released our trailer. That kind of details both our series, our interactive, and of course the graphic novel that we're building.
Okay, so what exactly do you guys do, or what do you have, right? So there's a token, and you're producing a movie with that token, or how does that work for you guys?
So the idea of the token is more a layer of interaction. So essentially, as a fan, if you're a fan of the story, by holding this token, you're basically given certain rights within this world. So it essentially
in the world of Back to Earth, the virtual world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So So it gives you those discounts on merchandise. It gives you the ability to, in our interactive experience, which is something that basically you need to solve puzzles as you go through the story. It gives you access to unlocking clues. For just holding the token itself, this can unlock rewards and special content as well that allow you to essentially immerse yourself further in the story.
Okay, so then what are the tokens? So the tokens are used for this interactive experience, and it's used to unlock pieces of content or elements, or to interact with others, or
yeah, essentially. So basically, think of it as digital merchandise. Disney is massive because essentially what they've done is they've taken their stories and they've turned them into merchandise. When you watch a really good story, a really good film, read a really great book, you kind of leave with this feeling, and you have to pour that feeling into something. And so ultimately, what you do is you go out and you buy the toys, and you buy the posters. And today, in kind of our digital realm, what we're seeing kind of everybody's moving into the digital sphere. And so how can you essentially put merchandise into the digital world? And I think Bitcoin does a great job of this, blockchain, because you can verifiably own these tokens. You can verifiably own what's on the blockchain. And that's something that's never been possible before. So
okay,
it gives ability to it.
So with your thing, so like for example, when Frozen came out, and I've got kids, we bought Olaf the snowman stuffed animals,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what you're hypothesizing, or what you're postulating, is that's kind of the physical manifestation of how I want to get a piece of that movie,
Yes.
in my home. So then I can if I watch your tokenized movie, I buy a token, and then I virtually have that piece of, is that ownership or mind share, or how would you define that exactly? Because
I would say to a degree, it's kind of ownership. Obviously, it doesn't grant you any rights as far as you don't get money from the production. It's not meant to make you money, but you do get kind of this kind of a more freeing aspect as far as how you use the token within our world, and exactly that token kind of guiding you into other aspects of the world that you maybe wouldn't have interacted with to begin with.
Okay, so then they get this, and then you use the crowdfunding dollars to produce a movie or produce the content? Is that kind of how it works, or?
Yeah. So we've used the money that we've crowdfunded. We've used that to essentially build out our pilot content, and now we're in the process of selling it to studios, pitching it to large production companies, and moving forward with creating much more content.
Okay, so let's say I have, well, is each token tied to a particular piece of content, or is the token tied to the entire platform?
It's tied to the entire platform.
Oh, okay, so hypothetically, so how does that work? Like, so let's say hypothetically you guys produce like the next hit show. Would that be the right term?
Sure.
So,
yeah.
Okay, so you produce the next hit show. So it's like the new Walking Dead or Game of Thrones, or some big show. So that then gets big. It goes all over on maybe TV networks, or it goes big on YouTube and gets like, 1 billion views or something on that front. Okay, so now I have your token. Now what? Do I just feel better about myself because I own the token? Do I get something out of it? How does that come together?
Essentially, yeah, the token is essentially it allows you, it incentivizes you to interact further with the content. So, and actually maybe even a better way to think about this, and instead of kind of looking at our IP, which is relatively unknown, is thinking about it more from a larger IP. For instance, if Star Wars were to apply this model to their world, and kind of what you could get, we know that this world is massive. We know that there's huge fan base for Star Wars. Imagine that they did have some sort of a Star Wars currency that you could buy and own, and then you could use that to essentially get discounts to the next Star Wars movie. You could use it to buy exclusive content from Star Wars, or to essentially hold it and then receive special offers and such. So So essentially what the token is doing is it's allowing you, or it's incentivizing you to interact further with content that maybe is not just exclusive to the TV show or the movies.
Okay. Interesting. So,
You also, I think you also get this really cool thing. Of course, when we started, digital assets, and I don't mean like tokens, but I mean more like ERC 721, like CryptoKitties, wasn't really a thing at the time. And now we're starting to begin to see kind of the first evolution of blockchain assets that are not just tokens, but they're actual assets, or like essentially avatars and things that you can put on the blockchain and have ownership of. And so think of that as like owning that Star Wars toy online and being able to have actual ownership of that toy and move it between platforms.
okay, so from a, so how does then your token, well, first step, okay, so you've gotten an ICO. What, do you have like a circulating supply limit, or is it one of those? Can you maybe give me the specs on that?
Yeah, so we had basically when we did our ICO, we released about 25% of our tokens. It was about 4.5 million, and we raised $1 million.
Okay, and are you guys listed on the exchanges right now, or?
We're listed on Cryptopia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like I said, and one of the issues, of course, that came about with kind of this botched ICO raise was we lost a lot of trust in the community, and that ended up really hurting us as far as getting representation on some of the larger exchanges as we continue to develop. So that's still something. Yeah, so that's still something that of course we're working on. But the big thing at the moment is getting the content out there and getting people to interact with it.
And what's the name of your token? Can I like look it up on CoinMarketCap out of curiosity, or?
Yeah, it's called Star Credits.
Star Credits?
Yeah.
Okay. So now you've got that, and I guess this becomes an interesting question, right? So you've got the coin out there, you've got a bunch of people who've crowdfunded. What is the story, like how is this thing going up in value, or how is this thing valued? Like there's got to be something it's pegged to, or some concept, right? Bitcoin, people say maybe it'll be worth 10% of gold. I don't know. You know what I mean? So what is the Star Credit tied to, or ideated against on that front?
Well, for us, it's demand for the story. If you really like the content, then you're more likely to purchase some tokens to interact with that content. The big thing for us, and again, it comes back to that sort of that DAO model, or this thing where essentially you have this argument between what is good money and what is bad money. And ultimately, what good money is the things that people don't want to spend. So you're looking at Bitcoin, you're looking at gold, where essentially these things over time tend to go up in value, versus bad money, which has that inflation factor. So every fiat currency like US dollars, any of those government nation currencies are considered bad money because they have that inflation. They kind of go down over the course of time in value. But the thing about bad money is you actually want to spend it, right? Because you don't want to hold that. Good money you want to hold, you want to hoard. And so ultimately, a lot of cryptocurrencies tend to be good money, because you want to hold them and not spend them, which makes them bad currencies. So ultimately, when kind of designing our token and how that token would interact with our world, we wanted to find kind of a nice between good money and bad money, where you're incentivized to spend the token. For instance, say we have a T-shirt on our store that is something you want to buy. Well, if you send us one of our tokens, we'll give you $5 off on that T-shirt. If our token's only worth 20 cents, then you're essentially valuing that token at $5. You're incentivized to use that token and spend it. But also, if you want to hold the token over, monthly or yearly over a certain amount of time, we can actually send you exclusive content and certain things that can incentivize you to continue to engage with our world. So it's kind of finding that sort of that short-term desire to spend versus a long-term desire to hold the token for extra content rewards. And ultimately, if you bring together a large enough audience, large enough demand, just for instance, we have 4.5 million tokens on the market. If we had 1 million members in our audience and each one of them held one token, you've effectively, removed 25% of the supply from the market. As far as the valuation of the token at that point, it would be a lot higher than where it is now.
Okay, so ultimately, what the goal is, you'll produce some piece of content that creates a lot of value, and then that piece of content that gains a lot of value will drive up the value of the platform and corresponding value of the token. Is that kind of the
Yeah,
concept model
yeah,
here?
yeah. And of course, we're also in, as we're looking at our model, we're also looking at how do you take this model and apply it to other IPs. And so one of the things that we're working on, the company Blockspace Media that I run, is essentially we're talking with large studios and how they can essentially design this sort of token experience for their IPs. And ultimately, what it comes down to is less about how do we increase the price of the token, but how do we use the token to get users and audience members more engaged with the content? How do we give them a good experience?
So in many ways, your unit model is more of an example, and you would ultimately want to go to, I don't know, the Disney, right? So that with the upcoming Infinity Wars movie, that they might tokenize that through your model because you've proven to them in some way, or you've got some sort of data that tokenizing the entertainment experience provides a new dimension to the user experience that ultimately makes more money for everybody in
Yeah,
some manner.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting. So how would that work, right? So like let's say, you know, Black Panther is a recent Marvel movie,
Hmm.
and it's gone big, right? I don't know what the numbers are, but it's over $1 billion in revenue.
Hmm.
So if hypothetically that was your piece of content and that was tokenized in the Star Token Block Media world, how would that impact the user, I guess, or like how would you envision that working? Because that's basically the nirvana that you're proposing, right?
Right. Yeah, and we're actually getting that pitch ready. The so I can say some things, I can't say others, but essentially what what you're looking at is how exactly could we essentially the value of a token is that depending on how you sell it to the audience, you're monetizing their interaction up front instead of hoping that they're going to have multiple points, I guess, where they're going to get out their credit card. So if you're able to sell them a token, from the start of their experience, we've already made, say, $10 off them. And so now they have $10 worth of tokens, and over the course of time, they can use these tokens for that interaction within your content. I think really though, ultimately, one of the more powerful aspects is with a digital asset, where essentially they can purchase that figurine, quote unquote, or that avatar online and have ownership or control of that avatar through the blockchain, whether or not that's through ERC 721, or if you're creating an avatar or some form of digital figurine that can be backed by a currency, so that when the user no longer wants it or wants to turn it into something else, they can essentially kind of quote unquote melt it down for this currency that it's backed by, if that makes sense.
So ultimately, you're talking about some sort of a crowdfunding mechanism
This wouldn't be
for.
crowdfunding, no. For a studio, they're already making, they already have enough money to fund production. They don't need to essentially beg for money from users or from their audience. Ultimately, what it is it's just one more avenue through which they can essentially engage users and get them to open up their wallets. So it's a new form of monetization for them. It's harder to monetize film than it was 10 years ago because we don't have video on demand is a lot different. We don't have DVDs like we used to, and so the back end for a lot of stories it kind of ends after that release to theaters. So it's how do you essentially kind of engage the next realm of monetization for the digital era?
Okay, so let's say we've got the Avengers Affinity War token. So I buy the Avengers Affinity War token.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm a fan of that, so I buy it. Now what?
Well,
Like,
I think the better way to potentially do it is as an incentivization model. So you buy a ticket to Avengers and Affinity War, and then you receive 7 Avenger tokens. And then you can use these tokens to essentially maybe get a discount on the popcorn or on the t-shirt that you're really interested in. So now you have this token that's saying, please use me. And you're now engaging with other aspects of this, this multidimensional universe that Marvel has created. And you're now taking out your wallet to purchase the T-shirt or the posters or to engage with the graphic novels that they have. And this token is kind of incentivizing your purchases through that system.
so why do I need a distributed database for that? That sounds like a loyalty program.
The power of it being that essentially what you're looking at with the internet and kind of what blockchain has done and why I think that ultimately Bitcoin as a marketing tool has been so powerful is that Bitcoin doesn't have a marketing team. And yet we're having this conversation today because we found Bitcoin, right? And so the power of having a token that essentially can expand beyond your network is that you can give this to somebody who has been a loyal fan from the get-go. And if they decide, oh, I don't want to use this for this, I want to sell this on the open market, they're essentially introducing a whole new slew of audience members into your world. So they, to a degree, they become your marketing channels outside of your original network, and they allow you to reach audience members that you may never know existed, or maybe never had the ability to contact in the first place. And that's the power of what Bitcoin has done, is because once Bitcoin released, Satoshi Nakamoto kind of stepped back and said, I don't want to do anything more with this. And today, we have all these third-party applications that are built around this Bitcoin in order to enable us to buy it, to sell it, to trade it.
Hmm. Okay. So I kind of see where you're going at and stuff like that. Hmm. So I guess, so let's go into, there's been a lot of talk about security tokens versus, or our tokens, or the talk is everyone's saying we're utility tokens, right? We're not speculations. And now with how Polymath came out a couple months ago, and then you had Kevin Harrington talk about how he's going to securitize or tokenize one of his real estate holdings. There's now this new concept of a security token that is potentially representing the next generation of crowdfunding or the next generation of liquidity for all sorts of traditionally illiquid type assets. So I guess where I'm still not clear, and part of it may be because the market is evolving. It seems like this is, well, no, it's not, I guess. So you're trying to say you're definitely going to say you're a utility token?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because, well, and one of the big things about a security token is essentially what you're doing is you're offering revenue or shares in the production of whatever you're creating. And there absolutely are some projects in the space, especially in entertainment. Of course, I don't want to name them, that are building security tokens. The issue being, and this is kind of going back to what we realized from the get-go, is when you do that, when you fund your entertainment through the sale of a security token and basically promise revenue return in the company, you're turning your entire audience into producers. And so they're no longer engaging with your entertainment from an enjoyable, I like this story aspect. They're watching it more from, am I going to make money off this when this is over? And so they can become much more critical of your project, and they're much less likely to actually use your token to engage that project. Because again, they're associating this token with a specific value.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
And that was the issue with the DAO, right? The DAO was a security token. It was this thing that you would use to invest in projects in the DAO. And people, when it launched, didn't want to use it to invest in projects in the DAO because they wanted to hold it to make money. They didn't want to
they were banking on further appreciation.
Yeah.
On that front.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, we've definitely been on for quite a bit. Before we wrap up, we always like to talk about, like the future predictions or whatever. So, we've got a lot of talks going on. Are we, did the bubble just pop? Are we in a lull? Is it going to heat up again? I assume you still possess some cryptocurrency holdings
Absolutely.
personally.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you have some skin in the game. Why don't you let's chat a little bit? Why don't you share your thoughts?
Yeah.
Are we out of the
Well,
are we out of the death cycle? Is it like that summer? Late spring? Yeah.
yeah. Well, a bit of a humble brag. I did sell a majority of my Bitcoin at 19,000. Um,
Oh, okay.
and the reason behind that was, one, I was looking at the $20,000 mark and saying this seems like this is going to be a pretty big mental zone for traders to sell. And then just looking at the how quickly Bitcoin went from around 5 to 7,000 to 20,000. It was so quick that there's just no way that this is sustainable. Now that we have come down, we went from basically 20,000 to $6,000. We have seen a major correction. That is very reminiscent of what we saw in 2013, 2014. Though I will say that we aren't we haven't yet broken resistance to the point where we're going to see a bear market continue for the next 6 months. The most recent bounce that we had from $6,000 to around where we're at right now of like 8,300 was one, it was expected, but if it continues to move upwards, I think that we may see a return to sort of like the bull market. There's still so much excitement and hype around cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and tokens that I would be surprised if we had an extended bear market, just because there's so much money on the sidelines waiting to get in. But even if we did, I think that ultimately, Bitcoin's price would be settling at around, a lower maximum range of maybe $3,000 before, potentially kind of going into that accumulation zone that it went into back in 2014 and 2015, and then, trying for another move up in the future.
Hmm. So then I guess the $1 million question is your cash still on the sidelines, or are you pouncing back in at the $6,000 to $8,000 opportunity on that front?
I like to keep pretty well diversified, so that my happiness is not based on what the price of Bitcoin is on any day. So for me, I'm happily invested in Bitcoin, and some other currencies, and 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 willing to kind of wait for a couple of years. I think it's a long-term play at this point. I think day trading cryptocurrencies, right? I came from that phase where I day traded cryptocurrencies. I bought the Ethereum ICO. I did not make as much money as I should have if I just held Ethereum. So, so I think ultimately what you have to do is you have to have a certain amount of faith. And this is the hardest part. You have to have a certain amount of faith in the ongoing, essentially longevity of the ecosystem. And I think so far Bitcoin's proven that over 10 years it can hold value, and that value can increase. So if you believe that in 5 years it'll be around still, I think that it's a pretty good bet that it'll be higher than it is today.
Wow. Good stuff. Well, hey guys, Clay, thank you for this hour or so that we've been on. Been a fun conversation. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, they go to what? Backtothestory.earth or what's?
They go to back2.earth. My email is clay@back2.earth, so they can contact me through that as well. And of course on Twitter, I'm ClaySpace.
Okay, great. Well, hey, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.